Good morning, and thank you for joining our webinar to learn more about the Clean Energy Transition Partnership Joint Call 2024. My name is Isabella Tarasco, Technology Investment Lead with Emissions Reduction Alberta, or ERA. Today, I'm joined by Chris Owttrim, ERA's Executive Director of Technology and Innovation. Thank you for joining us. Before we get things started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are. In the spirit of reconciliation, we have the privilege of living, working, and investing on traditional territories, which include Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 nations, Métis Nations Regions 3 and 4, Inuit, and all others who live and care for these lands. Acknowledgements like this are just part of the starting steps on a journey of reconciliation. Before we get into the agenda, I'd like to start by going through a few housekeeping items just to make sure we get the most of our time today. First of all, we are expecting a lot of participants today, so everyone's microphone is muted to avoid unintentional background noise. If you encounter technical challenges related to the webinar connection, please email Kevin at kduncan@eralberta.ca and we will try to help if we can. However, if you can't resolve your technical issues or if you need to leave early, we will be posting a recording of this webinar on our website. It will be uploaded on our webpage for the Clean Energy Transition Partnership Joint Call, which is linked off our homepage and on our funding page. The recording will include both the presentation and the live Q&A with audio. In terms of agenda for today, we have 1 hour together. First, I will talk briefly about ERA and our mandate. Next, we'll provide an overview of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, or CET Partnership, Joint Call 2024. We'll cover some key points regarding scope and eligibility for the call, the submission process, and the timelines around the funding decision. We'll also provide advice for anyone who's interested in making a submission. And finally, we'll end off the day by answering some of your questions. So, if you have any questions you would like us to address, please type them in the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel as we go along. We will answer as many as we can, but if we don't address your question, you're welcome to follow up with us afterwards. And so with that, let's get started. Since 2009, we've invested the proceeds from carbon pricing on large emitters to reduce greenhouse gases and strengthen the competitiveness of new and existing industries in Alberta. Our funding is sourced from Alberta's large emitters who are required to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to meet regulated targets under the Government of Alberta's tier regulation. We offer a clear line of sight from these funds to the investments in the technology solutions needed to help achieve emissions reductions and economic growth. Since 2009, we've committed $943 million towards 292 projects worth almost $8 billion. Our investments are helping measure methane emissions from satellites, transition Alberta's diesel-powered transit trucks, transport trucks and trains into electric and hydrogen, allow drones to plant trees in dangerous and difficult-to-reach areas, produce renewable energy and high-quality fertilizer from food waste. It's important to note that we require a one-to-one investment from private sources. Public funding is not enough to accelerate these new technologies, and we need to have industry show their support as well. Historically, we have significantly exceeded this requirement. Every dollar invested by ERA receives over $7 invested by private funders. This is important to ensure industry and the market see there is a market demand for the technology. Job creation is also top of mind. Our modeling suggests that our investments will generate over 46,000 person jobs per year by 2027 and contribute $6.9 billion to Alberta's GDP. Those numbers jumped over 63,000 and more than $9 billion respectively on a national level. Our guiding document, our technology roadmap, serves as a catalyst for our technology and solution investments and is all-encompassing in terms of sectors in Alberta. Primarily, it guides our investments and lays out the pathways for Alberta to become a global hub for innovation and technology. The TRM outlines the right mix of short, medium, and long-term technologies that will help Alberta realize its environmental and economic goals and support Canadian emissions targets. These include carbon sequestration, future fuels, energy efficiency, industrial transformation, and circular economy. These are the technology areas that we consider to have the greatest potential impact on Alberta's greenhouse gas emissions and economy, as well as the most relevance for other jurisdictions and sectors. Each technology area has unique investment and deployment needs. On the slide here, we present ERA's high-level perspective of the technologies, their timelines to market adoption, greenhouse gas reduction potential, and the anticipated economic benefits. The size of the technology circles represent the amount of potential they have in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Depending on where you sit in the ecosystem, you may see the placement of these focus areas differently. However, it's important to note that although the focus areas are plotted at one spot along the market adoption timelines on this scale, there are technology solutions across different timescales within each area. But please note, we are launching a new TRM in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Similar investment areas of focus, but please keep an eye out. I'll now pass it over to Chris to speak about the Clean Energy Transition Partnership and our participation in the Joint Call 2024.
Thanks very much, Isabella. So as she said, we're here today to talk about ERA's participation in the Clean Energy Transition Partnership Joint Call 2024. And I'm really excited to share the details of this program with you today. So the Clean Energy Transition Partnership is based primarily out of Europe. It's a multinational partnership between national and regional research, development, and innovation, or RDI, programs, mainly in European Union member states, as well as numerous non-EU partner countries like Canada. So currently, over 45 European and non-European countries participate in the CET partnership. Together, we pool our resources for an annual joint call to invest in a variety of clean technology solutions. So unlike the ERA-only calls that you may be used to us participating in, this program is really all about bringing together partnerships and connections and resources across national borders and indeed from a variety of stakeholders around the world. The CET partnership invests in diverse energy transition technologies with the goal of implementing the European Strategic Energy Technology Plan to be climate neutral by 2050. This also aligns with the Government of Alberta's mandate and a mission to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. So ERA is one of the key delivery mechanisms and tools in the Government of Alberta's approach to reducing emissions and growing the economy on that path to climate neutrality. ERA joined the CET partnership in January of 2022, and we've participated in joint calls each year. This builds on our prior participation in the ACT, or Accelerating CCUS Technologies program, where we funded a number of projects alongside some European partners. So we're continuing to expand our partnerships and connectivity with some of these international partners. We continue to be the only funding agency representing Canada in this partnership. So we're very happy to be a member and to be allowing Albertan and Canadian companies and innovators to access these programs. So each joint call under CET partnership is led by 7 transition initiatives, or TRIs. So these are configurations or groups of different CET partnership members who are working to advance technologies and solutions in specific areas. And so the way you can think about it is that the TRIs are the main acting bodies of the CET partnership. Within each TRI, members work to define the topics or call modules for the joint call for funding. They also work to organize the targeted and group-oriented stakeholder management and communication activities within the TRI. Lastly, the members of each TRI are responsible for implementing accompanying activities on knowledge management, maximizing impact, and knowledge sharing, which for those of you that are familiar with what ERA does, you know we're very big on that as well. This year, under CET partnership, there are 12 call modules. ERA is providing funding for 6 of the 12 modules this year. They include energy system flexibility, advanced renewable energy technologies, carbon capture utilization and storage, heating and cooling technologies, geothermal energy technologies, and clean energy integration in the built environment. And I'll be going through each of those areas in a little bit more detail right away in the upcoming slides. So to be funded by ERA through the CET partnership, your project must be aligned with one of those funding modules. It is required for each applicant to select one module to categorize your project. And if your project falls across multiple modules, we suggest you select the one that best fits. And there's quite a bit of detail available on the CET website to help you choose which module you might align with. As I mentioned in the next 3 slides, I'll be sharing a bit more about each of the technology modules for you folks to better understand what we're looking for and how we're thinking about the opportunities in this call. But again, I really do recommend you take a look at the Joint Call 2024 guidelines for the most detailed list available. I should also stress that while proposals must adhere to these guidelines, ERA also has specific eligibility and technology alignment criteria that we'll be applying in our lens when considering which projects to fund under CET partnership. So when in doubt, it's always best to speak to a member of our applications team to get a better sense of how your project might align. And so we'll have contact info at the end of the presentation, and we're always happy to have that conversation. So starting out with some overviews of the technology modules that we are considering as eligible under this year's joint call. We're going to start with module 2, which is looking to address the large-scale integration of renewable energy sources into power grids, including considering storage as a possible solution to deal with intermittency, and addressing the broad technological and market aspects related to system integration of variable renewables. So some examples for investment opportunities might include grid support technologies, including ways of managing inverter-based resources, energy storage technologies and systems for flexibility, system stability and flexible operations, innovative flexibility and firm supply sources, as well as demand-side manageability for flexibility in markets, and of course, system digitalization and related tools and technologies, including AI, digital twins, and similar to help optimize how our power grid operates. Similarly, Module 3 is also related to the power grid, so looking at the supply side of renewable energy, specifically looking at bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, or BECCS, as a great option for clean, firm power generation. That could include things like high-efficiency biomass cogeneration or integrated cogeneration and CHP systems with carbon capture and storage. Other areas of interest within Module 3 include next-generation solutions for renewable electricity production. And so, this could include any manner of taking renewable energy to the next step. So novel coatings, materials, concepts, components, novel system designs and configurations, integration of new technologies such as energy storage or thermal energy storage, and similar to Module 2, integration of digital solutions and automation throughout all the other technologies I've just mentioned. So modules 4 and 6 are the next two modules that ERA is supporting under CETP. Module 4 is really focused specifically on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Again, this is where the lion's share of our investments with our European partners have been made in the past. So we are still interested in projects in this area. Obviously, a key focus as we're seeing a first wave of carbon capture projects progress towards final investment decision is an emerging recognition of the really strong need for new technology solutions to help bring down costs and enhance the performance and applicability of carbon capture solutions. We're also very keen to support negative emissions technologies, including solutions, whether engineered or natural, for carbon removals. And we also think there's some potential for transportation and storage technologies, again, of carbon dioxide, to help sort of complete and fill out that carbon management ecosystem. Module 6 is related to heating and cooling technology. So these can be for buildings or industry. And really what we're all about here is new technology solutions to help bring those heating and cooling services to the relevant markets. We also see a strong potential for integration here of renewable sources of energy. Again, there's many technologies that help bridge that gap between heating and cooling efficiency in both the winter and the summer. So a great example would be ground source heat pumps for geo-exchange heating and cooling. We also think there's significant potential for biomass and waste to energy solutions to help provide heating services. There's also a significant potential here for thermal energy storage, which I've already alluded to in a previous module. So you can see how some of these modules may have some overlap, and it really depends on the use case of the technology of which module you're going to pick. Last but not least, heating and cooling networks. So district energy is obviously top of mind for many European countries. We see significant potential to apply that technology here in Alberta. So we would love to see some proposals in that area. We also know that Alberta is home to some very dense industrial clusters. And so we think there's significant potential for cascading heat or other means of sharing heat and cooling services among different industry sites. So modules 7 and 10 are again some specific focus on clean energy. So module 7 is geothermal energy technologies, as you can see on the slide. Again, this is all about production of geothermal energy, whether in the form of electricity or direct heat applications. we'd be very keen to see some proposals in this area as well. You will see when you read through the module description in the program guidelines that this area is quite broad and includes things like new drilling and completion technologies, reservoir optimization, stimulation, and management, as well as operation integration of geothermal plants and generators within the broader energy system. So I do encourage you to read that module. I will say, ERA's focus has typically been on the production side. So we don't tend to take exploration risk on geothermal projects. However, if that's part of a broader initiative that focuses on the technology to access, extract, and deliver that geothermal energy to a customer, then that could be a worthwhile project. So again, it's always worth it to have that discussion with our team in advance. Last but not least, Module 10 is all about clean energy integration in the built environment. And so this is all about taking buildings and other assets and making them more grid interactive. So going from a sort of a source of simple load or demand on the system to really being interactive when it comes to participation in the electricity grid, participation in district energy systems, and also recognizing the need for solutions for the life cycle of a building and the materials that go into that building. So quite a broad module area as well. And again, I encourage you to read the guidelines to get more detail on that one. A key point about the CET partnership program and joint call 2024 is that the objective here is to foster international collaboration. And for that reason, all applications must be submitted by a project consortium. So we can't have a single applicant applying to this program and receiving funding. You need an eligible consortium. And I can't stress that enough. That is the #1 reason why proposals get rejected in this program. Each project is required to have 3 eligible independent legal entities from at least 3 different countries or regions. So that's what we mean when we say an eligible consortium. And the simplest way to think about it is you need 3 partners from 3 countries. And if you can do that, then your consortium should be eligible. I should stress also that not all of the countries involved in the consortium need to be participants in the CET partnership. So we do require 2 of the partners to be EU members or Horizon Europe associated countries, of which Canada is one. So it could be Canada, a European nation, and then another nation from outside of CETP. And ultimately, we'll be assessing the eligibility of those consortia when they come through the program. In terms of the type of organizations that can participate in an eligible consortium, it is quite broad. So it could be an industry partner, local and regional governments, post-secondary institutions, innovators, research organizations, and even non-governmental organizations. I will stress that the majority of projects that we have funded under these European partnership programs in the past have involved post-secondary institutions from within Alberta as well as from within Europe, and that can be a very strong addition to your consortium. So I do encourage you to look at that. It is important to note that the total effort or contribution of a partner from one country or region can be a maximum of 75% of the total project work. So we do really want to foster collaboration here. We're not looking for token partnerships, and we are going to be looking at that in your budget and work plan. Again, if you're wondering about the specifics of the eligibility requirements for the consortium or how you can put a consortium together, there's quite a lot of information on the CET partnership webpage. One of the great benefits of ERA participating in CET partnership is that CETP includes their community of researchers, organizations, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and more. And so they've developed a very strong matchmaking platform with over 4,400 participants. And so again, if you are thinking, okay, these eligible consortiums, that sounds a little bit daunting, I really do encourage you to go to the CET partnership webpage. There you can find project partners, collaboration opportunities, and really use the tools that are available to help build out that consortium and develop your project idea. So again, can't stress enough the importance of making use of that matchmaking tool. So now let's focus a little bit more specifically on what ERA is looking for projects within the joint call. Now let me start out by saying that ERA is always focused on funding capital P projects. So initiatives with clear objectives, milestones, timelines, deliverables, and a budget. We're looking for initiatives that take a technology from point A to point B in that advancement towards commercialization. And so what that means more specifically is that we do not fund ongoing operations or open-ended research programs. So if you come to us with a 5-year open-ended concept where you're going to investigate a potential solution without clear objectives, without clear milestones, you're not very likely to be successful in this process. We are looking for projects with a maximum duration of 3 years from initiation. And so what that typically looks like is that following success in the funding program and award of funding, you'll have 36 months to develop, design, construct, commission, and then ideally operate your technology or pilot within that 3-year period. Projects funded in this year's joint call must begin sometime between September 1st and December 15th of 2025. So that's just over 11 months from now is when we would be expecting those projects to commence. So you do have a bit of time to put your proposal in. There'll be a review period, and then there will be a ramp up period where you can get your ducks in a row to get the project started. But that is a fairly tight window once we get to the end of next year to initiate projects. So please make sure you have that in mind as you develop your opportunity. Let's talk funding. So in CET Partnership Joint Call 2024, ERA has allocated up to $3 million Canadian for the competition, with up to $1 million of ERA funding per project. So in theory, we could fund 3 projects. We're also happy to fund projects at a lower funding request all the way down to $250,000 Canadian. And that again reflects the scale of solutions of projects, the scale of solutions and projects that we're targeting in this program. As is always the case, ERA's funding must be matched on a one-to-one basis with eligible contributions. Again, that means private capital or other forms of non-government funding that would support the project, which can also include in-kind expenses. And again, we have a detailed eligible expense guide that we encourage you to take a look at. And the maximum contribution that we can have to a single project in the joint call is no more than 50% of the project's eligible expenses. And I think you'll find that usually the constraint there is the 75% consortium participation that I mentioned earlier. So usually those two criteria won't interfere with each other. As always, ERA is working in partnership with other funding organizations in Alberta and across Canada. So although you can't necessarily use ERA and then another Canadian entity to make up your consortium of 3 countries, it never hurts to have additional supporters and investors at the table. So there may be an opportunity for us to share your proposals with some of ERA's trusted partners within Canada and within Alberta, and we'd be happy to do so. So when you're submitting your application, you may need to check a box to give us permission to do that, and I encourage you to do so if and when prompted. We also get a lot of questions in all of our funding programs about the stage of development that we're targeting with the investment. Now, you may have gotten an idea of that from the fact that our funding is somewhere between $250,000 and $1 million. That maybe gives you an idea of the scale of project we're looking at. But let me just take this slide to put a bit of a finer point on it. ERA is targeting funding for projects at the technology scale-up, field pilot, commercial demonstration, or commercial implementation stages. We do sometimes use the technology readiness level spectrum. However, we found that everyone, particularly when you go between North America and Europe, tends to define those TRL levels a little bit differently. So we'd prefer to just use the terminology you see on the slide to help better define what exactly we're looking for. So a field test or pilot is really at the point when you have a solution that's been proven in a prototype or at a bench scale, and you're ready to take it to a representative test under realistic conditions. And so typically there's elements of scale up, of prototypes and development of sort of beta or pilot units for testing. So that's sort of the earliest stage of project scope that we can consider under this program. If you're starting at an earlier stage of development, so let's say you have a prototype or you're working on a prototype right now, you are absolutely still eligible. You just need to make sure that your project scope for which you're applying funding gets you to that pilot test. Moving up the stages of development, we do also allow projects in the commercial demonstration stage. So this is well beyond now the beta or prototype stage, and we are looking at essentially a fully commercial deployment or demonstration of the technology. This must occur in an operational environment to be considered at this level. And again, this is where we start to get to larger dollars and more of an integration challenge. And then last but not least, at the upper end and getting very close to commercialization now, we do also consider funding for first of kind commercial implementations of technology. So this is all about that first of a kind unit being deployed in the Alberta or Canadian context. And so, you could certainly have a project that starts at that level and is all about deploying that technology. We know that, it's a big lift to get over that final hump. And so we're certainly happy to see some applications in that area. Again, we've mentioned TRL levels are defined differently by everyone, but if you're using the definitions commonly adopted here in Canada, this roughly corresponds to TRL between 5 and 9. And again, our team's happy to discuss positioning and alignment of projects if you have questions. Eligible applicants. So I've mentioned Clean Energy Transition Partnership Program has quite broad requirements or eligibility for who can apply and who can be participants in these consortiums. I'm happy to say ERA has similarly broad and open-ended requirements for who can apply. So ERA is built on the philosophy that good ideas can come from anywhere, and indeed we're open to applications from just about any type of organization, whether you're an industrial operator, a small enterprise, indigenous community, a university, a not-for-profit organization, or even an individual with a good idea. You know, we're happy to see those proposals come from anywhere. And you know, it's really important in the context of these international programs in particular to stress that applicants do not need to be Alberta-based. So you could be a company from outside Alberta that's applying for a project in Alberta, and you can still use ERA as your consortium partner under the CET partnership. Of course, we'd love to fund some Alberta companies and help them access these international funds as well. And so both models of project are equally valid. Partnerships can certainly present a strong value proposition. And of course, as mentioned earlier on, partnerships are absolutely essential to be eligible for this program. Again, that matchmaking program that is provided by the CET partnership organizers is going to be your best bet to secure those international partnerships. What ERA is looking for in these projects specifically would be benefits to Alberta. That's core to our mandate. It's core to why we're here and why we do this. And so I want to encourage all applicants to really keep that in mind, whether you're based in Alberta or not. We want you to show that your project is going to deliver tangible results to Alberta. Again, as mentioned, a great way to do this is to link in Alberta's post-secondary and research institutions, as well as Indigenous communities and other groups that can really help drive home those local connections, local benefits, and local outcomes that we're looking for. That, you know, really, in my opinion, is how we see good projects become great projects. And it can definitely put you over the top if you're in a field of similar proposals to have some of those partnerships at the table. So how do you submit your proposal? As usual, ERA has a two-step process for reviewing and adjudicating proposals. This is, of course, built into the Clean Energy Transition Partnership process that follows a similar model. First, applicants will submit what CETP calls a pre-proposal. It's a simple form that includes a description of your project, data on your consortium partners, team members, and a simple project budget. At this stage, the evaluators who come from Clean Energy Transition Partnership are looking at a couple of very high-level criteria. If there's innovation in your project, if it's realistic to implement the scope that you've proposed, and if you meet all of the eligibility criteria from both CET partnership as well as the participating funding nations. Again, in this case, ERA would be one of those funding bodies. After the pre-proposal deadline, evaluators will invite successful participants to submit a full proposal. So both stages of the proposal will be evaluated according to the following main evaluation criteria: excellence, impact, quality, efficiency of implementation, and outcomes. To find out more about what is contained in each criteria area, we really encourage you to read Section 5 of the Joint Call Guidelines, which again are available on the website. There will be additional specific requirements within the full proposals for those of you that are shortlisted, and we'll be providing additional information on that when you get to that, when and if you get to that stage. But you can expect that to include a deeper dive on the technology, on the intellectual property rights, risk analysis, and outcomes from the project. I will say that each funding nation or participating funder has a addendum that is required of applicants to submit to ensure that you align with individual countries' requirements. So for ERA, of course, our mandate being focused on emissions reductions and economic benefit, we may require applicants to submit additional detail on some of those details that you know, are really relevant to our mandate. And all proposals, both the pre-proposal and the full proposal, will need to be submitted through the CET partnership website. Again, they have a fully built out application portal, and there's quite a bit of resources available to help you navigate that portal through the main program website. Timeline. So this is extremely important. We are already at October 3rd, and I will say the deadline for submissions for pre-proposals under this program is Thursday, November 21st at 1400 Central European Time. Now that translates to 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So again, if you're a Canadian or Alberta-based applicant, you're going to want to be very careful of your time zones and making sure that you're ready to submit. Ideally, I would say on November 20th. Don't wait until the last day because nobody wants to be logging into an application portal at 5:30 a.m. Projects that are shortlisted will have from January of next year, so 2025, until April to write and submit a full project proposal. There will then be that additional stage of evaluation and due diligence that I mentioned by the CET partnership and consortium members, and successful applicants will be notified of a funding decision in early July 2025. And as mentioned previously, we will then require all projects to start and commence activities sometime between September and December of 2025. The last thing I want to talk about before we take your questions is some advice on how to prepare a successful application. With a global funding opportunity like this, it's really important that applicants make a strong case for why their project should be funded in order to stand out from what we expect to be a very crowded proposal. First, I would recommend that you start the process now. I mentioned we only have about a month and a half before the deadline. There's not a lot of, it doesn't take a month to pull together an application and fill out a form online. However, we know it does take time to forge international partnerships, get your own internal approvals, allocate resources, and really take the time and effort to put together a really strong proposal. So again, starting now is the best advice we can give you. The farther along you are in securing partnerships, securing funding, lining up a site, lining up technology partners, and more, the better off you'll be in terms of demonstrating that your project is real, high quality, and ready to advance. Since all submissions need to be submitted through the CETP online portal, please go there right away to register an account if you don't have one already. And if you do, I really suggest you go back and make sure that your login credentials still work and that the platform, you still know how to navigate the platform. Again, there's a ton of useful information both within the portal and within the CET partnership website that is really essential for you to read. The most important document to read, and I can't emphasize this enough, is the joint call documents provided on the CET partnership website. These documents, including the main call text and the supplementary guidelines, really have all the information that you're going to need to submit your application. And there is quite a lot of detail to go through if you really want to dig into the specifics of certain key points that we're looking for in the proposals. You can see on the slide here that we've helpfully pointed out where you can find those documents. So if you go to the CETP Joint Call 2024 webpage, there'll be this series of buttons on the left-hand side, and you can click to download and access all the documents that you need. If you do end up going through the process of reading the guidelines and thinking, oh no, I'm not eligible, or maybe I don't fit within the call, you can save yourself a lot of time by finding that out now instead of going to all the effort to write a proposal and figuring it out on the last day, or even after the evaluation process and finding out that you're not eligible. So we really do want to make sure that folks are using their time effectively and making sure that you fit before putting in the effort to submit a proposal. Again, our team is happy to speak really specifically to how your project aligns with ERA's priorities and our criteria. We can help you a little bit with the CETP platform itself, but there's also, again, quite a lot of support available from the main program. The next point is really an extension of the last one, and that's to review the evaluation criteria, which are provided on page 16 on the call text document. These are the criteria upon which each criteria will be evaluated and shortlisted. And again, as you've probably picked up from some of the previous slides, this call has very specific requirements for project eligibility and consortium eligibility. So we encourage you to investigate and confirm your eligibility again as you go through the process instead of hoping. Hope is not a strategy. With that, if you've made it this far, I do want to thank you for sticking with us. This is now your opportunity to ask questions of myself and Isabella. So please type your questions into the questions pane at the side of the control panel. That's typically on the right-hand side of your screen if you're using the most up-to-date version of GoToMeeting, and we'll be happy to triage those questions and get back to you. As we wait for those to come in, I'll just say, again, our applications team at applications@eralberta.ca is always happy to field questions from you or have a discussion about how your project and consortium might fit. So you can find that email address on our website and of course on the specific website for the program. But let's use this time now to answer any questions that come up in the moment.
Great, thanks everyone. Thanks, Chris, for that. So again, please put your questions in the questions box there and we will answer them as they come in. One of the first questions we have is how much can each partner contribute to the project? And so with that, I suggest that you look at the eligibility criteria on page 12 of the guidelines. In there, it does say that the total effort of one project consortium member in the consortium can only be a maximum of 60% of the total project effort. So this is measured in person months. However, if you're applying with a consortium from a number of different companies in the same region, the total project consortium can be a maximum 75% of project efforts from those consortium partners. So very, very specific requirements. Again, please refer to the eligibility criteria on page 12 of the call text guidelines. Another question here, what TRL is required for modules 2 and 3? And I would say the TRL requirements for all modules do differ. So again, read the call text because they do change. So this begins on page 25 of the call text guidelines. So for example, module 2 starts at TRL 2 and up, while module 3 is broken up into TRL 3 to 5 and 5 to 7. However, each country has its own national requirements on which TRLs they would look at. So ERA does look at those later stage TRL levels, and I will pass it over to Chris to provide a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Isabella, is that the overall CETP partnership has specific TRL requirements or expectations that are assigned on a module by module basis. But what Isabella said there is super important, where ERA's specific focus is on those higher technology readiness levels. What that means practically when you're putting together a project is that you could potentially apply for a project that starts at a lower TRL and receives support from another CETP funder. And then within the same project, the same consortium, potentially ERA funding could come in at a later level to support those higher TRLs. So we are able to balance and manage those different TRLs if you're looking at a project that spans quite a range. Again, you'll need to make sure you do a good job of justifying how realistic it is to, to do a significant TRL advancement within your project. But again, that's something that we'd be happy to help walk you through if you want to reach out to our team.
Thanks, Chris. Another question here, where do I go to apply? So this isn't like ERA's typical funding calls where you would apply on our website. You actually have to go to the Clean Energy Transition Partnership website to apply. There you will see that module or that application portal there. You're able to log in there and start your application. On a similar note, if we have a question here in terms of if you're applying for a project with multiple other countries, how does the funding work? Does every country under the CET partnership apply for funding from their respective governments? For example, if they're applying with France and you're applying for $1 million, can France do the same with their bucket of funding? So again, please read the guidelines. There does have to be one project coordinator for the projects that come to us. So that one project coordinator will be the one who applies for who puts in the application. Please do not submit multiple applications from all of the project consortium partners, because then we do need to ensure that that application, if it is eligible for the next stage, we have to make sure that only one application is submitted.
Yeah, I'd say that's a critical point. We have seen this in the past, and I think it stems from the nature of the program where you do need three countries supporting you. But exactly what Isabella said, we don't want to see three separate applications, let's say for Canada, France, and the United States. We want to see one application for CET partnership under which you'll be requesting funds from those three countries. And so that's, I think, the way you need to think about it is you're submitting for one project and you'll be funded by the countries that you've applied to from within the overall umbrella of CET partnership.
Great. Okay, the next question here. Can Alberta Innovates, CFER, or NRCan be a partner? And this is an interesting question that we get. So as mentioned, in ERA's typical calls for proposals, we like to see a consortium of partners come in for our projects. However, we do have a list of trusted partners that we can share these applications with. And so if you are one of our trusted partners, you are not eligible to receive funding from us. And I will pass it over to Chris to elaborate more.
Yeah, so that's the distinction between being there's different types of consortium members that can participate in these projects. So exactly what Isabella said, if you're a trusted partner of ours, so for example, Alberta Innovates, Natural Resources Canada, we're happy to, as with all of our projects, sort of co-fund and participate collaboratively on the project. And indeed, under the consortium requirements, you can certainly participate as a funder, as a participant, but those organizations themselves cannot be the lead applicant or the recipient of ERA funds under this program. So it's a bit of a an exercise in choosing the right lead applicant and project coordinator, as Isabella mentioned, and really thinking critically about what should the role of each of these organizations be. Is it as a funder? Is it as a technology provider? Is it as a service provider? And that will help you sort of navigate what your consortium arrangement needs to look like.
Thanks, Chris. So another question here is around the actual countries that are eligible to be partners in the consortium. So we had a question around, whether Switzerland is in the CET partnership yet, or, whether there's a list of countries that are included or excluded. In the call text, you will see the list of beneficiary partners, as well as those partners that have funding organizations in the annex of the call guidelines. So of these 3 beneficiary partners, at least 2 of them must be from either EU member states or Horizon Europe associated countries. So there is a list of those participating countries in Horizon Europe that is linked in the call text. So you can find this on page 13 of the call text. So I would refer you to that just to take another look. Now, we can have countries outside of the participating countries participate. However, those countries will not be eligible to get funding from this joint call. All right, moving on to the next question. Can projects be in the engineering development stage prior to piloting? Can they apply with those projects? I will pass it over to Chris.
Thanks very much, Isabella. So typically what ERA looks for in these sort of projects is we do want to see the full project lifecycle reflected. So again, as I mentioned, that could include some engineering and design work up front, but ideally we want to see some actual fabrication, assembly, installation, and commissioning of a piece of technology at a representative commercial site. And then we ideally want to see that technology operated. So that's sort of the ideal ERA project. We recognize not always that doesn't always fit within a 3-year time horizon. And so certainly if you need to package your project a little bit differently, maybe start a little bit later, that's okay. We do have some pretty strict requirements around, funding a study or an engineering, upfront engineering work just by itself. And so typically ERA does not fund projects that are only studies in this sort of program. We have other programming streams under which studies are eligible. But in the context of CET partnership, there is a little bit of a gray area where certain types of work can be eligible if they are starting at that stage. So again, you're going to have to dig into the guidelines a little bit and understand the specifics of your situation and how it applies. That's also something our team is happy to help with. But I'll say just broad strokes, if you're applying for sort of a pre-feasibility study and that's where the project ends, you're not very likely to be successful in this program.
Thanks, Chris. We have a question here, where will the slides be posted? So these slides will be posted on our website. So if you found this call through our website, through our funding calls, it will be posted on that same page there. So it'll be posted in the next few days here. So stay tuned for that. Moving on to the next question. Must all applications be a consortium? Yes, they must all be a consortium of at least 3 partners. So typically these are partners from the participating countries or participating funding agencies in the CET partnership. And we do have another question. Can all of the partners be companies, or is an academic partner necessary? I can take this and then maybe Chris can add on, but all partners can be companies. I think that's fine. Again, but we do encourage you to work with the academic institutions just in terms of the nature of this call and the types of projects that each call module is focused on. But I will pass it over to Chris for some additional thoughts.
Right. So again, I think the key thing on understanding the fit and the eligibility of your project and your consortium is going to come down to the specific text within the CETP partnership. Again, at ERA, we can tell you very well how well you fit with our funding model and what we're looking for in the projects, but ultimately some of those eligibility decisions are going to be made at the level of CET partnership. And so it does behoove you to go directly to the source and get your information there. And that's part of the nature of participating in these international programs is we're giving up a little bit of control over some of those factors of the process in order to get the win, which is the access and the connectivity to some of these partnerships.
Thanks, Chris. The next question is around the types of projects that we've funded in the past. And so I will say that in reference to the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, this is quite a new endeavor for us. And so we have yet to fund a project under the Clean Energy Transition Partnership. However, we have funded projects in the ACT, so that was Accelerating CCS Technologies. So I would refer you to our website to find more information on the types of projects that we have funded through that call for proposal. I believe they are about 7 or 8 of them, but I will pass it over to Chris to see if he's got any other thoughts there.
Yeah, thanks, Isabella. So that's exactly what I was thinking, is the ACT projects are probably your best bet as a representation of the types of projects that we would fund under this program, as well as, what a successful consortium could look like. So I think they're really, really useful examples. So I was just looking on our website. I think the easiest way to find those projects is either to go to our news releases and just search for ACT or Accelerating CCS Technologies. The news release summarizing those projects should come up there. As well, if you go into our project database, there's a search bar there. If you put in, again, those are all related to carbon capture and sequestration. So if you put in those keywords, some of those projects will come up, and it should be clear which ones those are. So again, probably a useful exercise to go through and just get a bit of a feel for what those consortia look like. So a couple of ones that would be easy to find because they have a very simple name would be the AMIGO project, so AMIGO, or the SPARSE project, the SPARSE project. And those are just two projects that happen to have nice acronyms and should be easy enough to look up in our search function.
Great, thanks, Chris. We have another question here around public companies. Are they able to apply? I would say yes. Again, please make sure you are looking at the eligibility requirements for all transnational participants. So for Canada, as well as those countries that you are hoping to partner with in this call. We have another question here around whether partners, whether it's okay to have partners from Canada, the US, and an EU country. Yep, we have seen that before. So please partner with the US where you can, as they are our closest trading partner. But yes, that is eligible as well. Another question we had come up, do projects need to take place in Alberta for ERA to provide funding? And I will pass it over to Chris to answer this one.
Yeah, it's a great question specifically for this program. I'll say for a generic ERA funding program, that is absolutely the case. For CET partnership, we are open to projects that have, I will say, reduced in Alberta footprint or in Alberta content. Again, that would be commensurate with the amount of funding you're requesting from ERA. So if you're looking for a big chunk of the project budget from ERA, there should be a more significant or substantial part of the project happening here or involving local companies. But I will say our geographic constraints are not as firm in this program, again, specifically because we're looking to build these partnerships and have some of these activities that may need to happen with one of the other two consortium companies, countries involved in the project. So again, that's something probably worth discussing as you're starting to put your project together and you're thinking about how much should I ask for from ERA within this project? Is it reasonable for me to ask for the maximum of $1 million? When maybe I'm only doing 10% of the project in Alberta? That's a conversation we're happy to have with you if you want to, it may be a case-by-case basis that we need to have that conversation. So again, it never hurts to reach out to our applications team on that front.
And I would say, just adding on to that, in terms of what we look for in the pre-proposal phase, we want to make sure that what you're applying for meets our criteria for, and generally what we'd look for in a call for proposals. So I would say, take a look at our eligible cost and expense guidelines in terms of what we would cover from ERA's perspective. So we do want to see those project activities covered in your application. So especially in that pre-proposal phase, the more information you could provide on the milestones in your project, what you're hoping to achieve, where the project's located, and what some of your project outcomes are, that's probably most beneficial for us to seriously consider this project within that scope of the joint call. And also look at the minimums. So if you're applying to ERA funding for less than $250,000, I would say you're probably best suited to apply to another funding organization for that. The kind of admin burden and reporting process is just really cost prohibitive when it comes to those lower amounts. So I'm not sure if Chris has anything else to add on to that.
Nope, I think that's all we need to say on that.
Wonderful. I will wait a couple more seconds to see if any other last minute questions come up. While you are thinking of those questions, I will remind everyone that if you have a question that comes up after this webinar, please contact our applications team. So that's applications@eralberta.ca. We'd be happy to set up a meeting with you, chat through your project, and help guide you in this process. So we did have one more question come up, returning to the NRCan question, would NRCan dollars be recognized for matching purposes? I can take this one. So we do require a one-to-one match from non-government funds. So that is private funding. So in short, no, we could not match those dollars. It does need to come from private sources of funding.
Absolutely. But of course, there's no reason why NRCan funds couldn't be part of a project. Again, it just can't contribute to the match. So that's an important distinction. There is certainly, it's often referred to as stacking. Stacking is certainly allowed of different government funds. But we, as Isabella said, we're not going to attribute that in terms of the amount that ERA funds can match. And again, that's a conversation we're happy to have, as it tends to be very specific to the nature of your financing plan. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this webinar. Thank you very much for your interest and your participation today. A lot of great questions, and I hope you were able to answer them all to your satisfaction. If you do have unanswered questions after the webinar and after reviewing all of the supporting materials, please do feel free to reach out to us. Again, Isabella had already listed off the email account. Just one more time, it's applications@eralberta.ca. It's also, I think, all over these slides and probably all over the program website as well. And so we are always happy to have a conversation about any questions you might have about the program in advance of a submission. Finally, we do hope to have this webinar recording, again, including both the presentation and the Q&A, posted on our website by the end of this week. So please keep an eye out if you do want to go back to anything we talked about. It'll certainly be available as a resource for you. Thank you once again for your attendance and participation today, and we hope you have a wonderful day.